You know what nobody tells you about getting married? It's not the wedding that'll break you financially. It's not even the honeymoon, or the ring, or any of that stuff everyone obsesses over during the planning phase. It's the 47 invisible conversations you're suddenly having about money every single week that you never had to think about when you were single. And somehow, despite making more money as a household than you ever did individually, you're sitting there 6 months after saying, "I do," wondering why you feel broker than you've ever felt in your entire life. My name is Mike, and I spend way too much time thinking about how marriage completely transforms people's financial psychology in ways that nobody prepares them for. If you're someone who got married and suddenly feels like money became 10 times more complicated than it ever was before, or if you're about to get married and you want to avoid the financial chaos that derails most couples, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this information helps you out. Here's something that's going to sound crazy, but it's absolutely true. According to recent studies, arguments about money are the #1 predictor of divorce. It's not cheating, it's not the in-laws, and it's not even basic incompatibility. It is money. Specifically, it is the disagreements about how to handle money as a couple. And here's the kicker that really drives me nuts. Most of these arguments aren't even about not having enough money. They're about having completely different philosophies about money that neither person realized they had until they were legally bound together. Look, when you're single, your financial life is relatively straightforward. You earn money, you decide how to spend it, save it, or invest it. And that's pretty much it. Sure, you might make some questionable decisions, but they're your questionable decisions. Nobody's judging you for ordering takeout 3 nights in a row, or buying that thing you definitely didn't need. It's your money and your life. But the moment you get married, everything shifts. Suddenly, you're not just making financial decisions for yourself. You're making them for a unit, for a partnership, and for your collective future together. Most people are completely unprepared for how psychologically difficult that transition actually is. Here's what most people don't realize until they're already knee-deep in it. Marriage doesn't just combine 2 bank accounts. It combines 2 completely different money stories, 2 sets of financial values that were shaped by entirely different upbringings, and 2 brains that have been wired to think about money in fundamentally different ways. One person grew up in a household where money was scarce, and every dollar had to be carefully allocated. The other person grew up where money was more abundant, and spending on experiences was prioritized. Neither approach is wrong, but when you try to merge them without addressing the underlying differences, you're essentially trying to speak 2 different languages and wondering why communication is so difficult. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in real life. You get married. Maybe you move in together if you weren't already living together, and suddenly you're looking at expenses you never had to negotiate with another person before. One person wants to spend $800 on a nice couch because they think furniture is an investment in your home. The other person thinks $800 for a couch is insane when you could get something functional for $200 and invest the difference. Who's right? Well, both of them are right, depending on their value system. But if you don't have a framework for making these decisions together, every single purchase becomes a potential argument.
Here's where the financial pressure really starts building in ways that catch people completely off guard. When you're single, if you want to be frugal for a few months to save up for something, you just do it. You eat rice and beans, you skip the social events that cost money, and you make it work. Nobody cares because it's your life. But when you're married, being frugal affects another person. Your decision to cut back on spending might mean your spouse can't do something they enjoy. Your choice to prioritize saving for retirement might conflict with their desire to take a vacation this year. Suddenly, financial discipline isn't just about your own willpower. It's about negotiating priorities with someone who has an equal say in how your money gets used. And here's the thing that really amplifies the pressure. Most couples combine their income into one household budget, which sounds simple until you realize what that actually means psychologically. Let's say one person makes $80,000 a year and the other makes $50,000. Technically, you're bringing in $130,000 as a household, which should feel like plenty for most couples in most areas. But here's what happens in practice. The higher earner often feels like they should have more say in financial decisions because they're contributing more. On the other side, the lower earner might feel guilty about spending money or resentful that their contribution isn't valued equally. Neither of these feelings is necessarily rational, but feelings about money rarely are. According to a study from TD Bank, 42% of couples who have been together for 5 years or more still argue about money on a regular basis. 42%? That means nearly half of all couples can't figure out how to handle finances together, even after years of practice. And when you dig into what they're actually arguing about, it's rarely about major financial disasters. It's about the day-to-day stuff. One person thinks they should be able to buy coffee every morning because it's only $5. The other person thinks that's wasteful when they could make coffee at home for pennies. Multiply that disagreement across groceries, entertainment, clothing, hobbies, and everything else you spend money on. And suddenly you understand why money becomes such a massive source of stress.
But here's where this gets really interesting, and honestly, kind of sad. The financial pressure after marriage isn't just about disagreements over spending. It's about the massive expectations that society dumps on married couples that single people simply don't face. When you're single, nobody expects you to buy a house. Sure, it might be nice, but you can rent forever and people just shrug. But the moment you get married, suddenly everyone's asking when you're going to buy a house. It is as if renting as a married couple is somehow shameful or a sign you haven't grown up yet. The same thing happens with having kids. When you're single, kids are this abstract future thing that you'll worry about eventually. But when you get married, suddenly you're supposed to start thinking about whether you can afford children, which means thinking about bigger houses, better school districts, college savings accounts, and all these expenses that might be 5 or 10 years away, but somehow feel immediately pressing, because you're married now, and that's what married people are supposed to do. Here's a statistic that should make you sit up and pay attention. The average cost of raising a child from birth to age 18 in the United States is now over $310,000. That's $17,000 per year, which doesn't even include college. And somehow, when you're dating, having kids is this romantic idea about creating a family. When you get married, it instantly becomes this overwhelming financial calculation where you're trying to figure out if you can afford to reproduce without destroying your financial future. This is the pressure nobody talks about. It's not just about managing money together. It's about managing the weight of all these social expectations while trying to build wealth, maintain your relationship, and not lose your mind in the process. Let me tell you about something that drives me absolutely crazy. Most financial advice for married couples focuses on tactics. Should you have joint accounts or separate accounts? How do you create a budget together? What's the best way to divide up expenses? These are fine questions, but they completely miss the real issue. The real issue is that most couples never sit down and have honest conversations about their financial values before they get married. They're so focused on planning the wedding and being excited about spending their lives together that they never actually discuss what their financial life together is going to look like. When I talk about financial values, I don't just mean whether you're a spender or a saver. It's about what money represents to you on a deeper psychological level. For some people, money represents security. They grew up worried about not having enough, so building a substantial emergency fund and having multiple layers of financial protection makes them feel safe. For other people, money represents freedom and experiences. They value travel, hobbies, and living life now rather than deferring everything to some distant future. Neither of these approaches is wrong, but if you marry someone with the opposite money personality and you never discuss it explicitly, you're setting yourself up for constant conflict. Think about it this way. One person in the marriage might be perfectly comfortable carrying a mortgage and car payments because they see debt as a tool for building wealth and enjoying life now. The other person might have grown up watching their parents struggle with debt, and now they're absolutely terrified of owing money to anyone for anything. When the first person suggests taking out a loan to buy a new car, they're thinking about low interest rates and manageable monthly payments. When the second person hears that suggestion, they're having a panic attack because to them, debt equals financial disaster. It is the same conversation, but with completely different emotional responses. Here's where the financial pressure becomes suffocating for a lot of couples. Most people get married with some level of existing debt. Maybe it's student loans, maybe it's credit card debt, or maybe it's a car payment. When you're single, that debt is your problem to deal with. But when you get married, suddenly it becomes a shared burden, even if only one person's name is on the loan. The person without debt might feel resentful that they're now indirectly responsible for their spouse's financial mistakes. The person with debt might feel judged and defensive, and neither person knows how to talk about it without starting a fight. According to a Northwestern Mutual study, the average American carries about $21,000 of personal debt, not including mortgages. That means when two people get married, they're potentially bringing $42,000 in debt into the relationship. That's a car payment, a student loan payment, and credit card payments, all eating into your household income before you've even paid for food and housing. The pressure of paying off debt while also saving for your future together, while also trying to enjoy your life and have some fun, creates this constant financial tension that most couples are completely unprepared for. But here's what really separates couples who build wealth together from couples who spend their entire marriage fighting about money. The successful ones understand that money is fundamentally a communication problem, not a math problem. The math is actually pretty simple. Spend less than you earn, invest the difference, and avoid high-interest debt. Done. But the communication part? That's where most people fail spectacularly. Most couples fall into one of two traps. Either they avoid talking about money altogether because it's uncomfortable and they don't want to fight, or they only talk about money when there's a problem, which means every money conversation becomes associated with stress and conflict. Both approaches are disasters. When you avoid talking about money, small disagreements become big resentments. When you only talk about money during crises, you never develop the skills to have productive financial conversations when the stakes are lower. The couples who actually succeed financially treat money like any other important aspect of their relationship. They schedule regular money meetings, maybe once a week, where they review their spending, discuss upcoming expenses, check in on their goals, and make sure they're on the same page. This isn't romantic, and it's certainly not fun, but you know what else isn't fun? Fighting about money for the next 40 years of your marriage. Research from the Journal of Financial Planning found that couples who discuss money at least once a week report significantly higher relationship satisfaction than couples who avoid the topic. Once a week. Not once a year during tax season or when there's a crisis. Once a week. They're touching base about their finances, making sure they're aligned, and addressing issues before they become problems. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Mike, that sounds exhausting. I didn't get married to have weekly business meetings with my spouse. And I get it, I really do. But here's the thing you need to understand. You're either going to intentionally create time to discuss money, or you're going to spend random, scattered hours throughout the week arguing about money when disagreements inevitably arise. One approach is scheduled and productive. The other is chaotic and destructive. You choose. Let me tell you about the single biggest financial mistake I see married couples make. And it's so common that it's almost universal. They combine their finances without first establishing a shared financial vision for their future. They open a joint checking account, start paying bills together, and think they've got it figured out. But they never actually discussed what they're building toward. One person might be thinking they should save aggressively for early retirement. The other person might be thinking they'll work until 65 and enjoy spending money now while they're young enough to enjoy it. These are fundamentally incompatible visions, and if you don't address them explicitly, every financial decision becomes a proxy war for this underlying disagreement. Here's how you fix this, and it's probably the most important financial conversation you'll ever have as a couple. You sit down together and you create what I call a shared financial vision document. This isn't a budget. Budgets are tactical. They tell you where your money goes each month. A financial vision is strategic. It defines what you're trying to accomplish with your money over your lifetime together. Start with the big questions. Do you want kids? If so, how many and when? This affects everything from housing to career decisions to savings goals. Where do you want to live long term? Are you willing to relocate for career opportunities? Or are you rooted in your current location? This affects housing costs, income potential, and lifestyle expenses. How do you want to handle aging parents? Will you potentially need to support them financially or care for them in your home? This is a massive potential expense that most young couples never discuss. What does retirement look like for you? Some people want to retire at 50 and travel the world. Others can't imagine not working and plan to stay active in their careers until they physically can't anymore. These different visions require completely different financial strategies. What matters more, experiences now or security later? This is the fundamental trade-off in personal finance, and there's no universally right answer. Some couples prioritize taking vacations and making memories, even if it means saving less. Others are willing to live more frugally now to build substantial wealth for later. You have to figure out together where you fall on this spectrum. Once you've discussed these big-picture questions, Then you can start getting tactical about budgets and spending plans and investment strategies. Here's another thing that creates massive financial pressure after marriage that almost nobody talks about. The comparison game gets 10 times worse when you're married. When you're single, you might occasionally feel bad that your friends make more money or have nicer stuff than you, but it's abstract. It doesn't really affect your life that much. When you're married, suddenly you're comparing your household to other households. Your friends buy a house. You wonder why you're still renting. Your siblings take an expensive vacation, and you feel pressure to do the same. Your coworkers have nicer cars, bigger homes, and fancier lifestyles, and somehow it feels like a reflection on your marriage if you can't keep up. This comparison pressure is absolutely toxic to wealth building, and it's incredibly hard to resist because it feels like everyone else has it figured out. But here's what you need to understand. Most of what you're seeing is either debt-fueled lifestyle inflation or inherited wealth that has nothing to do with that couple's actual earnings. According to the Federal Reserve, 37% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing money or selling something. 37%. That means more than 1 in 3 of those couples you're comparing yourself to are actually broke. They just don't look broke because they're spending money they don't have. The couples who build real wealth stop playing the comparison game entirely. They define success for themselves based on their values, not based on what everyone else is doing. Maybe success means having $2 million saved by age 50, even if it means driving older cars and living in a modest house. Maybe success means having enough passive income to work part-time, doing something you love, even if it means making less money than you could in a traditional career. The specific definition doesn't matter. What matters is that you define it together and you stay focused on your path instead of constantly looking sideways at everyone else. Here's something that will probably make you uncomfortable, but needs to be addressed. Financial infidelity is a real thing, and it's shockingly common. This is when one person in a marriage hides spending, maintains secret accounts, or lies about financial decisions. According to a survey by the National Endowment for Financial Education, 43% of Americans who have combined finances with a partner admit to committing financial deception. 43%. Almost half of all couples have lied to each other about money. This happens for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's because one person feels controlled by the other and wants some financial autonomy. Sometimes it's shame about spending habits or debt. Sometimes it's fear of judgment or conflict. But regardless of the reason, financial deception absolutely destroys trust in a relationship. And once trust is broken around money, it's incredibly hard to rebuild. The solution isn't to monitor your spouse's every transaction or maintain completely separate finances where you never talk about money. The solution is to build a financial system together that gives both people some autonomy while maintaining transparency. A lot of couples find success with what's sometimes called the yours, mine, and ours approach. You have a joint account for shared expenses like housing, utilities, and groceries, but each person also has a personal account for their own discretionary spending that they can use however they want, without needing permission or justification. This approach works because it acknowledges that even in marriage, individuals need some level of financial independence. If someone wants to spend $100 on a hobby their spouse thinks is ridiculous, that's fine as long as it's coming from their personal spending account and they're still contributing appropriately to shared expenses and savings goals. But here's the critical piece that makes this work. You have to agree up front on how much goes into personal accounts versus shared accounts and savings. If one person is funneling most of their income into their personal account, while the other person is covering all the shared expenses, that's not a partnership. That's one person subsidizing the other person's lifestyle. The allocation needs to be fair and proportional, and you need to revisit it regularly as your financial situation changes. Now let's talk about something that creates enormous pressure that most couples don't see coming. Career decisions become infinitely more complicated when you're married. When you're single, if you want to change careers or go back to school or take a lower-paying job that you're passionate about, you just do it. You figure out how to make it work financially because you're only affecting yourself. When you're married, every career decision affects your household. If you want to take a year off to travel, you're not just impacting your income, you're impacting your spouse's life and your shared financial goals. This creates situations where people feel trapped in jobs they hate because leaving would affect their spouse. Or they feel resentful because their spouse's career choices are limiting their household income. These are incredibly difficult conversations that require a lot of empathy and flexibility from both people. Maybe one person wants to pursue a passion that doesn't pay well. Can the household afford that if the other person increases their income, or if you adjust your lifestyle? Maybe one person wants to go back to school for an advanced degree. Does the long-term earning potential justify the short-term sacrifice? There's no universal right answer to these questions. What matters is that you're making these decisions together as a team, not unilaterally imposing your career choices on your spouse without consideration for how it affects them. Here's something I want to address because it comes up constantly and it creates enormous tension. The division of financial responsibilities in a marriage. Who pays the bills? Who manages the investments? Who makes sure taxes get filed? Who tracks spending and maintains the budget? A lot of couples fall into a pattern where one person handles all the finances because they're more interested in it or better with numbers. This seems efficient, but it creates serious problems. If only one person understands your household finances, you're creating a dangerous single point of failure. If that person gets sick, dies, or just makes a mistake, the other person is completely lost. Plus, when only one person manages the money, the other person often feels disconnected from financial decisions and less invested in financial goals. The better approach is to ensure both people have at least basic financial literacy and involvement in key decisions. So where does all this leave us? Marriage doesn't have to be a financial disaster, but it does require you to approach money completely differently than when you were single. You need to have explicit conversations about your financial values. Create a shared vision for your future. Establish systems that promote both transparency and autonomy. And commit to regular communication about money. The couples who figure this out early build wealth together. They support each other's goals, make joint decisions that reflect shared values, and create financial security that makes their entire lives less stressful. The couples who ignore these issues spend years arguing about money, accumulating resentment, and wondering why financial success feels impossible, even though they're earning good money. The financial pressure after marriage is real. It's intense, and almost nobody warns you about it before you say I do. But now you know. You know what challenges to expect. You know how to address them proactively. And you have the tools to build a financial partnership that actually works. The question is whether you're going to use this information or ignore it and hope everything works out. It is your choice. But I urge you to choose wisely, because this might be the most important financial decision you ever make for your relationship and your future. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the hidden pressures of marriage and money. If this resonated with you, share it with your partner and use it to start that first big conversation tonight. I'm Mike, and I'll see you in the next video as we continue to break down the reality of personal finance. A shared vision is great, but you can't build a future while you're drowning in the present. Most of these money arguments vanish the second you have a real buffer between your family and the chaos of the world. That buffer starts with the $1,000 wall, the single hardest psychological hurdle you'll ever face. I've mapped out exactly how to scale that wall so you can finally stop just surviving and start building. Click right here and let's get to work.